Hello everyone, I'm back with another video. I'm not sure all of my videos are for everyone, but I welcome everyone to try watching my videos at least. This one is Pokemon related, but it's also a bit of a maths video. So I'm not sure how much everybody will love that, but it's just using like high school level maths. Hopefully it won't be too complicated for everyone. But this video, I'm sure it won't go as viral as the previous one did. It's about win rate scoring compared to Pokemon. So like, the thing is, everybody like they look at win rates and then they're told like, don't look too much into them. It doesn't mean much or anything at all. And you know, I don't think that those people like dismissing it are completely wrong at all. I think that there are like so many confounding factors that go into a Pokemon's win rate. But I think it does still help to be able to compare win rates and get a sense of like, if things were completely up to chance, like how unlikely is it for something to be in a certain way. And well, this will give us this little piece of mathematics will let us get a better sense of that. But before we begin, there is the proviso. You can't just go applying this to any like Smogon tournament data that you've already got, because this calculation requires complete information. So not only do you need to know what Pokemon every player brought, you need to know in like what matchups what Pokemon were brought. So, you know, if Jim Cool and BKC play a tournament game and BKC or Jim Cool wins without revealing their last Pokemon, you need to know there was that specific game that BKC brought Tyranitar and it wasn't a different game in the data set, because it becomes important when calculating this. So with that proviso out of the way, for tournament hosts who are able to collect that information, this is what you can do with it. I wrote up a little sheet on this. I might try and link it in the description. I might do it later, like not when I put this video live at first, because it's quite late when I'm recording this. But yeah, I wrote this a year and a half ago when I first figured things out. So I was like slowly scroll things a little bit, but and I do recommend like reading a few stuff, but I guess I'll read through it. That's kind of the best way, because I was quite happy with how I wrote this. So we've kind of done a bit of an introduction, but on the specific mathematics, this is using the normal approximation of the binomial distribution. And after we've gone through this, I'm going to show you some examples of some tournaments that I hosted last year. So yeah, this is the basics of the mathematics. If you've done like high school stats, you'll be familiar with this, or like secondary school. I live in the UK, so it's like secondary school to me, but I know there's so many Americans out there, and like, you know, if you're from some other country and you call it something different, I'm doing my best here. This is like stats that you can learn when you're like 16 to 18 typically, but obviously you can learn it at any stage in life. But basically we have a way of calculating the mean and the standard deviation using a number of trials and a given probability of success. And specifically, we can approximate the binomial distribution when with the normal distribution when n times p and n times 1 minus p are both greater than or equal to 5. So our first assumption here is that we assume that Pokemon has a 50% chance of winning or losing. Now obviously we know that's not true, but this is all about like trying to see how far we can go in disproving that assumption, right? But if we assume that, then we get n over 2 is the mean and the square root of n over 2 is the standard deviation. And for n to be sufficiently large that we can even do this, we require that np and n times 1 minus p are the same thing, which is n over 2 is greater than or equal to 5. So we need n to be greater than or equal to 10. Pretty simple, but that means that when calculating this, like the score, you shouldn't really be doing it if you don't have at least 10 trials. So yeah, when the sample size is too low, you can't really assign a meaningful score, is basically what that's saying. The Pokemon performance score, as I called it, how cute, is defined to be the probability that your sampled X is less than or equal to the actual number of wins X. So to use the normal distribution approximation to the binomial distribution, we have to use something called the continuity correction. So it becomes this: you need to add a 0.5 into it. And then from all of that, we can then calculate what's called the z-score. So there's this fancy formula here. But basically we get 2 times the wins plus 1 minus the number of trials, all divided by the square root of n, is the quote-unquote z-score. And then... have you ever seen a normal distribution? I've got one up on screen now. It makes it a bit easier. Basically, you have like this midpoint. You've got these points where it's the mean plus or minus the standard deviation, and you kind of expect values to like cluster like this if it's actually represented by a normal distribution with a given mean and standard deviation. So the z-score basically is the like how far along on either side, I think, of this bell curve that you are. Basically you use that with a reference table to get the probability of a given, what do you call it? The probability of a Pokemon getting a given win rate, or getting the win rate that they got if all the battles were decided completely randomly. So that's the concept. I'm going to continue scrolling through this, describing the interpretation there as well, and preparing the data. And kind of a note on further applications is that you can do this with pairs of Pokemon as well. You could even like maybe do this with like I'm not sure. You could do this with leads, actually. That could be an interesting one. But yeah, the main hump is it does require a bit more data preparation than just regular usage stats. But okay, let's look at a couple examples. I'm gonna start with ADVOU. This was from a tournament I hosted last year with the express intent of getting data to be able to show you something like this. And yeah, you can see here this wasn't as large as the ADV50 one, so plus like bear in mind the meta's obviously changed in like a year or so on. But some examples here, I'll like just explain what they mean in the first place. So for example, Salamence, it was used 44 times, there was a 31.4% usage percentage, and it won 47.7% of the time. That's fine. And its score is 0.4168. So that means that there was like a 41.68 chance, or about 42%, of if all the games are just like the winner was assigned randomly, of Salamence getting that win rate or worse. So nothing particularly special, like values close to 0.5 don't mean a whole lot. The numbers kind of further at either end, those are a bit more interesting. So Aerodactyl, there's a 98.7% roughly chance of it getting that win rate or worse than if wins were decided randomly. Or in other words, about a 1.3% chance of it getting that win rate or better, or of it getting a better win rate than that, sorry. So for it to get better than a 64% win rate with 39 usage, there's only a 1.3% chance of that. So So when you get like numbers like that, you have to go like, is there an explanation for it? Is it just that it's like a small sample size? Is it because the players who are using it are just better players? Is it because there was luck? Is it because it's getting a lot of good matchups in the current meta? Like, obviously there's collecting the data and then there's interpreting the data and like what it means to you. But this is about just like, here's some more data. You can use this to like drive your questions. You can certainly generate a lot of hot takes off of it. One thing to note here as well is how there's a lot of things that clustered at the high end and not a lot of things clustered at the low end. So that kind of tells you that like a lot of the Pokemon that weren't used very much also largely weren't getting particularly great win rates. But, you know, if you have like a tier like ADV 50 where all 50 Pokemon were to be used at least 10 times, which, you know, if we played enough tournaments, pretty likely to happen, then we could assign a score to every Pokemon and they'd fit on a normal curve in some way, shape or form. Maybe not like neatly clustered around 50% perhaps, but we'd see. But with this small amount, you don't get so many Pokemon which are used a lot but have a really poor score. Here in this case though, we do have Zapdos, which there's only a 3% chance roughly of it getting a 34% or worse win rate with 35 uses. That's what it says. Now if we go to our friend ADV 50, we've got a bit more data here. I wasn't even able to fit all of it on this particular chart. This is from season 2. And this is also from 2022. I don't have particularly recent data at the moment for various reasons, but hopefully there will be more next year. More tournaments and more opportunities to source data. Here we see the second most used Pokemon, Tauros, with 109 uses getting a 56.9% win rate, which it had like a 97.8% chance of it getting that win rate or worse with that number of uses. It was quite a large amount of usage and it's still posting a very impressive score. And we can see that that's more impressive than, say, Chimeko's 62.5% win rate with 16 uses. And, you know, I just think, isn't that interesting? Lanoon, I think, posted a particularly poor win rate here with 25 uses at 32% win rate and less than 5% chance of that just happening randomly. So, yeah, I think in this specific tournament you had one player, Jay Feats, using one team over and over again, and overall he performed pretty well. So that is an explanation for certain Pokemon, like also Ludicolo, having particularly impressive win rates because a person was very successful with one team being used repeatedly. And that's an interesting thing to note. So, you know, that's what happened here. So this kind of just like goes out to anyone who collects tournament data in Pokemon tournaments, anyone who runs Pokemon tournaments. This sort of thing is a bit more work, but it does let you put a bit more light on like what those win rates that Pokemon are getting actually means. And also, if you're actively like collecting the data with like a database like I am with like SQL Server, then you can get this sort of information a lot more easily and then do a whole lot more with it as well. So that's all from me for now. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.